My girlfriend smirked and said, "You're the cheapest man I've ever dated." I quietly replied, "Maybe." She grabbed her bag and left. The next evening, she came running back. But she wasn't looking for me. I'm 31. I'd been with her for almost 2 years, and for most of that time I genuinely believed we were building something real. I'm not rich. I'm not poor either. I work a normal job, pay my bills on time, keep a little saved every month, and I don't throw money around just to prove a point to people who think spending equals love. I grew up watching my parents struggle with debt because they never said no to anything, and I promised myself early on that I'd never live like that. She knew this about me. I'd told her more than once, in calm conversations, not lectures. I thought she understood it. I was wrong about a lot of things that year, and that was just the first one. That night, we were sitting in my living room after I told her I wasn't going to pay for the birthday trip her friends had planned. A 4-day thing at some overpriced resort a few hours away, flights included, for a group of people I'd met maybe twice. The total for my share alone was almost 2 months of savings. I told her I couldn't do it, not wouldn't, couldn't. Not without draining an emergency fund I'd built up slowly over 3 years. She didn't take it well. "You're the cheapest man I've ever dated," she said, arms crossed, chin lifted, that smirk on her face like she'd just delivered some devastating, undeniable truth about my character. "Maybe," I said. I didn't flinch. I didn't explain myself. I just said it, quiet and flat, and went back to my phone like the conversation was already over. That answer made her angrier than if I'd argued. I could see it land wrong on her face, like she'd been expecting a fight and instead got a shrug. She wanted me to defend myself, to backpedal, to promise I'd find the money somehow, maybe put it on a card, anything that proved I valued her opinion of me more than my own plans. Instead, I gave her nothing, and that silence broke something in her that had probably been cracking for a while already. "You know what? I'm done. I actually can't do this anymore," she said, already standing, already grabbing her bag off the couch like she'd rehearsed the motion in her head beforehand. "Okay," I said. "Okay? That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say?" She stood there for a second, bag on her shoulder, like she genuinely expected me to jump up and stop her, maybe grab her wrist, maybe beg. I didn't move an inch. I just watched her, waiting to see what she'd do next. She walked out and the door shut hard enough to rattle the picture frame in the hallway, the one with a photo of the two of us from a trip to the coast almost a year earlier, back when things still felt easy between us. I sat there for a long time after that, not devastated, not exactly relieved either, just tired, the specific kind of tired you get after holding something heavy for way too long and finally getting to set it down, even if setting it down still hurts your arms. Here's what she didn't know that night. 2 months earlier, I'd found out she'd been messaging her ex again. Not just messaging, talking about meeting up as friends, she said, when I confronted her gently, without accusations, just questions over dinner one evening. I let it go at the time because I didn't have proof of anything beyond flirty texts and a lot of heart emojis on old photos she'd liked. I told myself I was overreacting, that jealousy was making me see things that weren't there. But something in me had already started pulling back after that conversation, quietly, without me even fully realizing it. The trip she wanted me to pay for wasn't really about the trip. Looking back, I think it was about testing exactly how much I'd sacrificed to keep her happy, how far I'd bend before I broke. I failed her test. Turns out she passed mine, just not in the way either of us expected. Update 1. She texted me around midnight. Nothing dramatic, just, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I didn't answer that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, replaying the argument, not with regret exactly, more like I was checking my own reaction for cracks, making sure I hadn't been too harsh, too cold. I decided I hadn't been. I'd just been honest. The next morning, I replied with one line, "Sure, whenever you're free." She didn't respond right away, which was unusual for her. Normally, she'd blow up my phone within the hour if I gave a short reply like that, asking what I meant, asking if I was mad, filling silence with more words. I figured she was letting the quiet do the talking for once, maybe a strategy from one of those relationship podcasts she used to play in the car. I went to work, did my thing, came home, made dinner, watched some TV. A completely normal Tuesday. If she was expecting me to spiral without her, she was going to be disappointed. Around 7 p.m. my phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," she said, voice tight, almost clipped. "Are you home?" "Yeah." "Can I come by? I left some stuff there and I need to grab it." "Sure." I want to be clear, at this point I still thought this was just the aftermath of a bad breakup, nothing more complicated than two people untangling their lives from each other. I had no idea what was actually happening on her end, and honestly, in that moment I wasn't thinking about her much at all. I was thinking about how quiet the apartment felt without her stuff scattered across the counter, and how I didn't hate that quiet nearly as much as I expected to. She showed up around 8, and she looked different. Not sad different, not red-eyed from crying over me different. Rattled different. Distracted. Her eyes kept flicking to her phone even while she talked to me. She grabbed a hoodie and a charger from the bedroom, barely made eye contact, and mumbled a thanks on her way out. I didn't think much of it that night. Looking back, I should have. Update 2. The next evening my phone rang again, same number. I picked up expecting more of the same, maybe her asking for something else she'd forgotten, a pair of shoes, a jacket. Instead, I heard crying. Real crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and ugly, not performance tears, not the kind meant to manipulate. "Can I come over? Please, I don't know where else to go." I almost said no. Honestly, I probably should have said no. But something in her voice, a raw kind of panic I hadn't heard from her before, made me say, okay, before I'd really thought it through. She showed up 15 minutes later, and she was a wreck. Mascara streaked down her face, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. I let her in, and she sat on my couch, the same couch she'd stormed off of 2 nights earlier, and just started talking. Fast, like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve or changed her mind about telling me anything at all. Turns out, the ex she'd been just talking to wasn't just talking to her either. 3 days after she walked out on me, she'd packed a bag and gone straight to his place, thinking it was going to be some big romantic reunion, the guy sweeping her off her feet, finally proving that I'd been right to feel uneasy about him all along. Instead, she found out he'd been living with someone else the entire time. Someone he introduced, right there in the kitchen, as his fiancé, while my ex-girlfriend stood in the doorway with her suitcase, expecting to move in. "He humiliated me," she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. In front of her. He actually laughed, said I was just someone he talked to when things were boring, that he never meant any of it. I sat there and let her talk. I wasn't angry anymore, not the sharp kind of angry I might have expected from myself. I was just watching this unfold like a movie I already somehow knew the ending to, even though I hadn't seen this particular scene coming. "So why are you here?" I finally asked, once she'd run out of steam. "Because I don't have anywhere else to go tonight. My roommate's already subletting my room to someone else. My parents are 3 states away, and I just..." She stopped, looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since she'd walked in. "I know I don't deserve you being nice to me right now." "You're right," I said. "You don't." But I let her stay on the couch that night anyway. Not because I wanted her back, not even a little. Because even after everything, I'm not the kind of person who tosses someone out into the night with nowhere to go, no matter what they said to me 2 days earlier. That's a decision I'd have to sit with later, because it complicated everything that came after, more than I could have guessed sitting there that first night. Update 3. She stayed 3 nights. Each night, the story got a little more detailed, and honestly, a little more damning of her, though she didn't seem to notice that part. She told me how she'd been talking to him for almost 4 months before she ever actually left me, how it started as innocent catching up and slowly turned into something else entirely. How she'd been comparing every little thing I did to some fantasy version of him she'd built up in her head, a version that apparently didn't exist outside of nostalgia and a few flattering old photos. I wanted a reason to leave that wasn't just, "I like someone else," she admitted on the second night, staring down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "So, when you said no to the trip, I used it. I made it bigger than it was. I made you into the villain of the story so I wouldn't have to be." Hearing her say it out loud didn't feel like vindication the way I'd have thought it might months earlier, if I'd imagined a version of this conversation. It just felt sad. Sad for her, honestly, and sad for the 2 years I'd spent trying to be someone worth staying for, only to find out the whole time there had been a countdown running that had nothing to do with anything I did or didn't do. On the third night, she tried something I should have seen coming from a mile away. "Maybe this happened for a reason," she said quietly, shifting closer to me on the couch than she had on the previous nights. "Maybe I needed to lose everything to realize what I actually had." I looked at her for a long moment, long enough that she started to look uncomfortable under it. "You didn't lose everything. You lost him. That's different. That's not fair." "None of this has been fair," I said. "Not to me, anyway." She didn't have a response to that. I told her she could stay one more night while she sorted out somewhere to go, but that this, meaning us, meaning any version of getting back together, wasn't happening. Not now, not later. She cried again, quieter this time, in a way that told me she already knew that's what I was going to say and had asked anyway, just to see. Update 4. Here's the part that still makes me shake my head every time I think about it. While she was staying with me, supposedly sorting things out, figuring out her next move emotionally, she was also messaging a mutual friend of ours, someone from our old shared friend group, asking if he had space in his apartment for a few weeks. Not asking me. Asking him. From my couch. Using my Wi-Fi. While I was in the next room making her tea because she said her stomach hurt from stress. I only found out because he texted me directly, decent enough to give me a heads up before agreeing to anything. "Hey man, weird question, but did you and her actually break up? She's asking to crash at my place, and I don't want to step on anything if things are complicated." That's when it clicked, all at once, like a light switching on in a room I hadn't realized was dark. She wasn't staying with me because she had nowhere else to go emotionally, because she trusted me, because some part of her still cared what happened to us. She was staying with me because it was free, comfortable, familiar, and available while she quietly lined up her next landing spot somewhere else. The tears might have been real in the moment. The vulnerability, the shaking hands, all of it might have been genuine as far as it went. But the end game was never me. I was just the stopgap between one plan falling apart and the next one getting built. I didn't confront her with anger, even though I felt something sharp and cold settle in my chest reading that text. I just told her plainly the next morning over coffee that I knew about the messages and that she needed to have a plan by that evening. "I wasn't trying to hide it from you," she said, which was almost impressive in how quickly and smoothly the lie came out, like she'd had it ready in case this exact moment happened. "You were literally hiding it from me in my apartment while I was making you tea." She didn't argue after that. She packed her bag, the same bag she'd grabbed so dramatically the night she called me cheap, and left before dinner. This time, there was no slammed door. Just a quiet click of the lock, which somehow felt louder than the slam ever had. Update 5. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't quite. About a week later, the mutual friend called me, sounding a little sheepish. Turns out he'd let her stay after all, against his better judgment. Mostly because he felt sorry for her and didn't know the full story of what had happened between us. He didn't know about the ex, didn't know about the messages sent from my apartment, didn't know any of it until he mentioned to his girlfriend that he had a friend from out of a relationship crashing on his couch for a bit. His girlfriend did not take that well, understandably, and things escalated from there in a way that had nothing to do with me, but somehow still looped back around to me anyway, the way these things always seem to. His girlfriend found some old messages on his phone, nothing recent, nothing to do with my ex specifically, but enough history with other women that it blew the whole relationship apart within a matter of days. My ex ended up in the middle of a breakup that wasn't hers, in an apartment that was never really hers to stay in, watching another relationship collapse around her for the second time in 2 weeks. He told me all this almost like he needed someone to vent to, and I found myself in the strange position of listening patiently to a guy I barely talked to anymore, all because of a chain of events that started with a fight about a resort trip. I didn't feel smug hearing it. I want to be honest about that. It just felt like watching dominoes that had been set up long before that night in my apartment, falling one after another, further and further away from anything I actually had control over. Climax. About 3 weeks after all of that, I ran into her at a grocery store, of all places, standing in the same aisle we used to argue over, her wanting name brand everything, me reaching for the store brand right next to it. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or bad lighting under fluorescent lights. We made small talk, the kind two people make when there's too much history to say anything real, standing in a checkout line with a cart full of someone else's groceries between them. "I heard you're doing okay," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I am. I'm not, if you're wondering." "I wasn't wondering," I said, and I meant it kindly, not cruelly, just as a plain fact. I'd stopped wondering about her the night I found out about the messages sent to our mutual friend, sent while I was in the next room trying to help her. She told me, without me asking, that she was staying with her sister now, temporarily, trying to reset. Her words, not mine. She mentioned the friend's breakup, too, almost like she wanted me to know she was aware of the damage that had rippled out from her decisions, or maybe she just wanted someone to acknowledge how hard her month had been. I didn't offer much in response. There wasn't much left to say that either of us hadn't already said, one way or another, over those 3 nights on my couch. I didn't feel joy hearing any of it, and I want to be honest about that too, because it would be easy to tell this story as some triumphant little revenge tale where the cheap guy wins and the ungrateful girlfriend gets exactly what's coming to her in neat, satisfying order. It wasn't quite like that. It just felt like watching a series of choices she'd made. Long before that night I said, maybe, and meant it. Finally catch up to her all at once, in a grocery store, under bad lighting, with both of us just standing there. Resolution. It's been about 5 months since all of it happened. I'm still in the same apartment, still working the same job, still not the kind of man who pays for a resort trip for people who think I'm cheap for having boundaries about my own savings. If anything, that whole situation just confirmed something I already half believed, that the people who call you cheap the loudest are usually the ones measuring your worth by what you're willing to hand over, not by who you actually are underneath it. I started seeing someone new about 2 months ago, someone who actually laughed when I told her this story, instead of judging me for any part of it, which told me more about her character in that one reaction than months of careful dating conversations could have. She said something that stuck with me, that a man who says maybe calmly in the middle of an insult is a man who already knows exactly who he is and doesn't need anyone else's approval to keep being that person. The ex-girlfriend and I don't talk anymore, not out of bitterness on my end, just because there's genuinely nothing left to say between us. Last I heard through mutual friends, she's still figuring things out, taking things slow, whatever that means for her these days. As for the guy she left me for, and the friend she tried to use as a backup plan, I don't know or particularly care what happened to either of them beyond what I've already heard secondhand. Their mess was never mine to carry, and I stopped trying to carry it the moment that lock clicked shut behind her for the last time. I think about that night sometimes, the smirk on her face when she called me cheap, so sure that word was going to land the way she wanted it to. So sure it would make me chase after her approval the way it probably would have with someone else. It didn't. If anything, it clarified something I'd been too tired, too distracted, too caught up in the relationship to admit to myself for months before that. Being called cheap by someone who was quietly planning her exit the whole time isn't really an insult at all. It's just noise on the way out the door, the kind you barely remember the sound of once the door's actually closed for good.